The snow had come early that year, falling in thick veils over the mountain town like it meant to smother all memory. No carriages passed. No wagons stirred. Only the sound of wind dragging along the wooden roofs, and the hiss of ice collecting at the corners of shuttered windows. Sage Whitlow stood outside the general store with her back straight, though her boots leaked and her spine ached from too many nights sleeping upright. She didn't knock. Didn't speak. Just waited, hands folded, as if silence were a safer plea than words. Her coat was threadbare, stitched poorly where the sleeve had torn, and her long ash-brown hair was damp from melted snow. Her face bore the kind of tiredness that never asked to be pitied, just not noticed. Inside, she could see warm movement, a lantern swaying, hands sorting sacks of flour, boots scraping wood. She took a step forward. The door creaked open before she reached it. Elias Frost leaned against the frame, arms crossed, face as rigid as the frost blooming behind him. "You again." "I've coin," she whispered, lifting the tied cloth in her hand. "Only need oats. Or cornmeal. Just enough for a few days." His lip curled. "Didn't you run off last spring? Heard tell you left a man standing at the altar." She swallowed but said nothing. "Funny how girls like you come crawling back when winter gets mean. Go on. We don't feed ghosts." The door slammed before she could speak again. A swirl of snow rose up at her feet, licking at the hems of her dress. She didn't move. Just stood there blinking slow, until a mother tugged her children past and muttered, "That's the one. Dirty shame of the Whitlows." Sage walked away. Not fast, just steady. Her footprints didn't stay long, the wind eager to erase any sign she'd ever been there. At the edge of town, the old well sat frozen beneath a broken awning. She sat beside it, not because she was cold, but because she was tired of pretending not to be. The wood was slick, but it held. She gathered a handful of clean snow, pressed it against her cracked lips, and tasted quiet. Everything around her was silent but for the wind, and she began to wonder if she was still real at all. Then a giggle broke the hush. Two girls stood nearby, dressed in woolen shawls too big for their tiny frames. One held a pine cone like it was treasure. The other had a stick she used as a wand, poking at the snowbanks with determined purpose. They must have been 5, twins maybe, though one had a scar near her left eyebrow, and the other's cheeks glowed redder than the lanterns above. "You're not from here," said the bolder twin. Sage nodded slowly. "You look like a ghost lady," said the other. "But prettier." Sage smiled faintly. "That's so." The bold one held out half a biscuit. "We save this. For me. Mama always said share with cold people, even if they look haunted." Sage took it gently. "Thank you." A tall shadow loomed suddenly behind them, blotting out the gray light. The girls didn't flinch. They looked up, grinning. "Papa!" The man was enormous, nearly a head taller than any man Sage had ever seen. Bare arms. Broad chest half hidden beneath a heavy fur cloak. His skin was copper-toned, dark and warm against the snow. Long black hair, braided back tight. A faint white scar crossed his right eyebrow. And his eyes, quiet, unreadable, held Sage like the wind held the trees. "She's cold," said one twin, pointing at Sage. "Looks like she got no place," said the other. The man said nothing. Just looked. Not with pity. Not even judgment. Just stillness. Sage stood, brushing snow from her skirt. "I didn't mean." "Come," he said. That was all. He turned, and the girls followed, skipping over the snow like birds hopping between branches. Sage watched them go, the biscuit still in her hand. Her fingers curled around it tight, like it might vanish if she let herself hope. She didn't know why her feet moved. Didn't know why she followed. But something about the man's stillness felt like shelter. Not kindness. Not safety. Just stillness. Their cabin sat half a mile from town, tucked behind frost-covered pines, and wrapped in smoke from a chimney that coughed more than it sang. The door creaked as he opened it. Sage hesitated. "You don't owe me," she whispered. He looked over his shoulder. "The fire's warm." She stepped in. The room was spare, wooden floors, Two beds pushed to corners, a rug faded to the color of dust. A table. A stove. A rocking chair with a blanket folded over the arm. It smelled of pine and tobacco and something older. The girls tugged off their shawls and raced to the beds. The man knelt beside the stove and fed it wood with practiced hands. Sage hovered by the door. He didn't look at her. Sit. She sat. He ladled stew into a tin bowl and placed it on the table. Eat. She ate. Her hands shook, but he didn't mention it. The girls watched her, eyes wide. The one with the scar whispered, "She's not scary up close." The man finally sat, his bulk filling the space like a mountain you didn't dare climb. Name? Sage Whitlow. He nodded once. Koken. The fire popped in the silence. She can braid, said one twin. Can you braid? Asked the other, crawling into Sage's lap. Sage's voice cracked, just a little. I used to. My little sister had hair down to her waist. Where is she? Gone. The girl hugged her waist. You can braid us now. Sage held still, then slowly wrapped her arms around the child. Koken didn't speak, but he looked. And Sage, for the first time in many nights, didn't feel like a stranger to her own skin. As darkness fell and the storm thickened outside, Koken stood and set out a pallet by the fire. For you. Sage looked at the soft wool laid there. You're sure? He nodded once. They like you. I don't even know what I'm doing here. Neither do I, he said, then added. But the snow doesn't wait for knowing. She lay down slowly, the heat of the fire kissing her cheeks. The girls curled beside her like kittens, warm and unafraid. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, no one moved. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, Sage closed her eyes not out of despair, but from peace. The wind had not let up by morning. It clawed against the windows like some hungry thing, yet the inside of the cabin felt wrapped in something warmer than fire. Sage stirred, her eyes opening to soft breathing, and two small heads curled against her ribs. Luma's hand was flung over her belly. Isha snored like a kitten in a nest. She blinked at the rafters above. Pine beams darkened with years of smoke, and for a moment she forgot she had no home, no name worth speaking, no rightful place on this earth. The scent of something cooking roused her fully. Ashwood. Stew. And the faintest touch of cedar. She slipped out from under the girls and crossed quietly to the stove. Koken stood there bare-chested again, pouring water into the kettle, steam rising around his frame like the breath of some ancient bear. His hair was still damp from snow. He must have gone out early to fetch more wood. He didn't turn when he said, "They sleep hard. Like their mother." Sage folded her arms across her chest. She must have been kind. She was quiet, he replied, but fierce where it counted. Sage leaned against the table, letting the heat of the stove reach her toes. I haven't been fierce in a long time. He turned then, eyes scanning her face, not to judge, but to measure something invisible. You stayed last night. You didn't run. I was tired. And the girls? They're not yours. No, she said, lifting her chin. But for a night it felt like someone could be. He said nothing, but he handed her a tin cup filled with hot water steeped in dried chamomile. His fingers brushed hers, warm, work-worn, not shy at all. Later that day, she watched him from the doorway. Snow still fell, but less violent now, more like a hush. He was out in the clearing, splitting logs with one great swing after another. Each motion was deliberate, as if each crack of the wood matched the rhythm of something broken long ago. She meant to leave. Truly she did. The cabin had given her a night's warmth, a meal. She had no right to linger in a man's world, let alone an Apache's, in a place where settlers still muttered curses at his people under their breath. She walked toward the path leading back to town. Maybe she could find work, cleaning floors or scrubbing pots. But halfway down the slope, her foot caught on a root hidden beneath snow. She fell hard, elbow striking stone, breath knocked loose from her chest. When she sat up, her skirt soaked, blood beating at her wrist, Koken was already beside her. He didn't ask what she was doing. He didn't lecture or scowl. He simply crouched, lifted her as though she weighed no more than a frostbitten sapling, and carried her back to the cabin in silence. She watched his jaw tighten. He set her gently on a bench and inspected her wrist. "You should wrap it," she murmured. "I will." "You don't have to." He met her eyes. "You don't know what I have to do. And I don't care what town folk say." Her breath caught. "You're not weak," he added, binding her wrist in slow, practiced loops. "You just forgot how not to flinch." The girls hovered nearby with concerned eyes, holding a folded cloth and a jar of bear fat. That night, she didn't ask for a second blanket. Koken placed one beside her without a word. The girls tucked themselves into her side again, and before drifting off, Luma whispered, "You smell like Mama used to. Like soap and wind." Sage brushed hair from her forehead. "You two talk too much." "She said talking makes people brave," said Isha. Sage smiled and kissed both their brows. She was right. The next few days passed like soft breath between snowfalls. Sage didn't stay by the door. She worked. She stitched the girls' mittens where they'd worn holes. She peeled potatoes with steady hands. She scrubbed the hearth until it shone. She wasn't trying to earn anything, only to be useful again. But usefulness, she learned, was sometimes a bomb. On the fourth morning, she accompanied Koken and the girls to town. The girls skipped ahead, singing something half-remembered. Koken walked beside her, stoic and silent. When they passed the chapel, Mrs. Havelock stood beneath the porch roof, her shawl tight around her bony shoulders. "Funny sight," she drawled, looking straight at Sage. "Apache and fallen settler woman raising children. The Lord's got his work cut out for him." Koken kept walking. Sage almost did. But then she turned, eyes steady. "Better a man who splits wood for warmth than one who splits women for pride." Mrs. Havelock's mouth dropped open, but Sage was already gone. That night, Koken placed a small wooden figure beside her bowl of stew. A tiny bear with a flower in its mouth. "For the girls?" she asked. He shook his head. "They have plenty." She stared down at it, throat tightening. "I carved it for someone who doesn't shake anymore." Her voice was a whisper. "I still shake. Just not as often." "You get to," he said. "But you stay anyway. That's what matters." The storm eased, but the cold deepened. One evening, she sat brushing Luma's hair while Isha curled up with a book. Koken watched them from the corner, his face unreadable but softer now, like thawed stone. Sage caught his eye. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" she asked. He nodded. "Sometimes. I talk too much now." He cracked the faintest smile. "It suits you." She flushed. That night, sleep didn't come easy. She stared at the fire long after the others had settled, listening to the wood snap and shift in the hearth. Her wrist throbbed faintly under the bandage. She thought of the church where she'd been promised to a man she didn't love, who raised his voice and hand in equal measure. She remembered standing in front of the congregation, veil trembling, heart screaming to run. She remembered running. And now, sitting in the middle of a cabin in Apache land, cradling warmth not bought or bargained for, she realized. Maybe she'd been right to flee. Maybe shame could give way to something else, something quieter. Something earned. The next morning, Koken brought in a bundle of kindling. He looked at her a long time. "You braid well," he said. "Years of practice. They smile more now. They're good girls." He paused. "They sleep easier too." She looked up. "So do I." And though the snow still fell outside, and the town still spit her name like a curse, inside that cabin there was heat enough to keep ghosts at bay. The days settled into rhythm, like snow falling soft against an old drumbeat. Quiet work. Shared glances. The smell of simmering stew. In the hush of that winter-bound cabin, something unspoken grew between the silences. Not love, not yet, but a kind of recognition. Like finding your own reflection in the still water of another's eyes. Sage no longer flinched when Koken entered the room. The girls no longer asked if she would leave. And Koken, though he still spoke with the spareness of someone used to holding his grief close, had begun to say things that didn't need saying. Things like rest, or I'll finish that, or once when she sneezed into her apron, you'll catch cold. Use my coat. That coat, heavy and fur-lined, hung beside the door now. She swore it had grown warmer just from being in the same room as their laughter. But warmth couldn't buy bread. Their salt was running low. The flour, too. And so, on a morning when the sky hung low and sullen, Sage volunteered to go into town. Koken had raised a brow but said nothing. Only handed her a small pouch of coin, and wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. I'll be back by dusk, she promised, brushing snow off her boots. Take the trail around the ridge, he murmured. The pass is glass underfoot. I'll be careful. His nod lingered. His eyes lingered longer. Sage trudged into the cold, fingers clutched tight beneath her wrap. Each step reminded her that she did not quite belong to this place, neither to the land, nor to the people in town who watched her come down the ridge like some cursed omen. The bell above Elias Frost's store jangled sharp as she entered. His eyes snapped up, hard and cold as the steel nails he sold. You again. I need salt. And meal. He glanced at the pouch in her hand. Where'd you get coin? I earned it. He looked her over, slow and sour. Didn't think the Apache paid his whores. The word struck, not with surprise, but the old sting of humiliation worn raw by repetition. She placed the pouch on the counter. I cook. I clean. I braid his daughter's hair. I sew their sleeves shut so snow doesn't bite their wrists. That's work. Not what you just said. He gave a low grunt, then opened the till. Take what you can carry. She left without another word, arms full of wrapped parcels. The gossip rippled behind her like wind over water. She kept walking. When she returned, face red with cold and pride alike, Koken met her halfway to the cabin. You're bleeding, he said, nodding to her knuckles where frostbite had split them open. Not bad, she said. Besides, I got what we needed. He took the parcels and, without a word, pressed her hands between his palms. Rough, steady, warm. He didn't ask what had been said in town. He didn't need to. Shame carries its own scent. That night, they sat near the fire. The girls played with wooden figures at their feet. Koken carved in silence. Sage stirred the stew with her bandaged hand. The air smelled of time, smoke, and unspoken things. You never ask, she said suddenly. Koken looked up. Where I came from. Why I ran. His eyes didn't leave hers. You're here. That's enough. She swallowed. But if I stay longer. You should know. He tilted his head. Only if you need to tell it. She stared into the fire. I was meant to marry a man with land. A man who believed bruises meant loyalty. My mother said it was my duty. My father said I was lucky to be chosen at all. Koken's hands stilled. I ran the morning of the wedding. I didn't even take my shoes. Just the clothes on my back and a slice of bread in my pocket. I spent months sleeping behind barns, cleaning floors for crusts of bread, trading silence for safety. The flames cracked softly, like the sound of something being unwrapped. I thought it was weakness, not standing and bearing it, she whispered. But now I think, maybe staying in pain isn't strength. Maybe leaving was. Koken didn't speak. He just reached into the firelight and set something small beside her. His carving. A bird. Smooth. Wings slightly lifted. Caught mid-flight. For you, he said. She touched it. Wood, warm from his palm. Alive with gesture. She looked up. What was your wife's name? His gaze didn't shift. Teya. Sage nodded slowly. She sounds kind. She died in summer. Took a fever with the birth. I buried her beneath the willow north of the clearing. Isha and Luma don't remember her voice anymore. But I do. The girls curled against each other, drifting into sleep. She braided their hair, he added. Like you do. But she sang while she did it. You hum instead. Sage smiled faintly. Songs are dangerous. They hold memories I'm not ready to hear. He nodded. But humming keeps hands steady. She looked at him, really looked, at the scar above his brow, the wear in his eyes, the way he carved not to pass time, but to remember what time took. "You never asked me to stay," she said. He poked at the fire. "You never asked to leave." Silence folded between them, but it was gentle now. Not cold. Not distant. Just quiet. When the wind stirred the chimney and smoke curled high into the rafters, Isha whimpered from her place on the bed. Sage rose, tucked the blanket tighter around the child, then paused. There, just beneath the floorboards, something stuck out. A piece of ribbon, worn and frayed. She pulled gently. A locket. Round. Dented. Carved with the same bird he'd given her. She opened it. Inside, a drawing on faded paper. Koken. Taya. And 2 small swaddled bundles. She held it in her palm and returned to the fire. "I think this is yours." He looked down, then back at her. "Not anymore." "But it's her." He took a long breath. She would want the girls to know her face. But she'd also want them to know how to smile again. Sage held the locket to the firelight. "Then I'll help them remember both." Koken met her eyes. "Why?" "Because once, someone should have done the same for me." The flames danced. The smoke curled high above, like names written on the air. Taya. Sage. The ones they'd lost. The ones they might yet become. And for the first time, Sage felt her name settle in her chest without ache. It no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a beginning. The snow came back harder that night. Thicker, meaner, the kind that roared through the valley like it meant to erase the world. It coated rooftops, buried fences, turned lanterns into dim, trembling ghosts. Inside the cabin, the fire burned bright. The girls laughed, cheeks flushed from a game of hide-and-seek. Koken sat at the table mending a boot. Sage stirred soup, glancing now and then at the windows, uneasy. She'd learned the rhythm of storms here. How the wind sighed when it was lonesome, and how it screamed when something was coming. And this one screamed. When the knock came, it was not loud, but final. Like a gavel striking wood. Koken opened the door with his hand on the latch, his stance wide. On the other side stood Marshal Tuckery, coat flapping, face hard as granite. Beside him, Havelock, arms crossed like she owned righteousness. And a third settler man Sage didn't know, holding a rifle too tight. "We need a word," the marshal said. Koken didn't move. "You come to my door in a storm?" "A boy's missing," Havelock snapped. "Little Henry Fielding. Disappeared this morning." "What's that got to do with me?" Koken asked, voice low, even. Havelock's lip curled. "You take in strays, don't you? Women with no homes. No names. No right to be here." The girls peeked around the corner, eyes wide. Sage stepped forward. "I haven't seen any boy." The settler man stepped close. She was seen down near the creek. Where he liked to play. Wearing a red shawl. Sage froze. She had gone to the creek earlier to wash potatoes. Her shawl was red. Koken looked at her. Not with doubt, but something else. Something coiled. Tuckery rubbed his temple. "We're not here to accuse. We just want her to come back with us. Answer questions." "No," Koken said. Sage swallowed. "If a child is missing, I'll help search." "You'll come alone," Havelock barked. "Not with him shadowing you." Koken's jaw tightened. "She doesn't go anywhere alone." "I'm not property," Sage said, voice trembling. "I'll go. I have nothing to hide." He looked at her then, eyes searching. She nodded once. "A promise, I'll be all right." She wrapped the red shawl tight and stepped out into the storm. They didn't ride. The snow was too thick. They walked in a tight group, Sage slightly ahead, like some prisoner in a quiet war. The townsfolk stood at windows as they passed, watching. Some shook their heads. Others just closed their shutters. By the time they reached the chapel steps, Sage's fingers had gone numb. Inside, the pews were mostly empty, save for a few women whispering behind gloved hands. They sat her in the front, like a witness at her own trial. "Where were you today?" asked the marshal. "Down by the creek. I had potatoes to scrub. The water there runs under the ice." "Did you see the boy?" No. You didn't speak with him? I didn't see him. Havelock leaned forward. You expect us to believe a woman like you didn't chase after a child? Sage lifted her chin. I chased after no one. And I came here because I thought helping mattered more than pride. They asked more. Where she'd been. What she wore. What time she left. Sage answered them all with the calm of a woman who'd already been judged once and survived. Just when they seemed to run dry of questions, the church door burst open. Snow spilled in. And there stood Koken, holding a bundled figure in his arms. A boy. Alive. Sleeping. Mud on his boots. A torn satchel slung over his chest. The room gasped. He wandered too far, Koken said. Slipped in the ravine. I followed his tracks. He looked straight at Sage. The girls helped me look. Marshal Tuckery stepped forward, took the boy gently. He's breathing steady. Cold, but not broken. Koken walked to Sage, placed a hand on her shoulder. The room quieted. Havelock sneered. Doesn't prove anything. It proves everything, the marshal said. Let the woman speak no more tonight. Let her rest. The judgment broke like glass. Back at the cabin, Sage dropped her shawl to the floor, shoulders shaking. Not from cold. From how close it had come. Again. The almosts. The near condemnations. The world so quick to set fire to women who had no one to speak their name in defense. Koken built the fire higher. When it roared steady, he sat across from her. I failed you, he said. Shouldn't have let them take you alone. I chose to go, she said. Because the only way out of a noose is to walk through the gallows sometimes. He looked at her hands. At the scrape on her palm. You shouldn't have had to learn that. I did. A long time ago. He stood, reached into the cupboard, pulled something out. A beaded band, red and brown, soft with age. This was hers, he said. Taya's. She wore it when she needed strength. Sage held it like it was made of air and memory. I'm not her, she whispered. I know. But I don't want to be just a shadow in this house. He met her gaze. You're not. You're firelight. Outside, the wind began to quiet. The girls, already in bed, murmured in half-sleep. One said, She came back, Papa. The other whispered, She always will. Sage smiled faintly. For the first time, not from fear, not from shame, but from belief. The storm had passed. And so had the judgment. The snow softened come morning, like the storm had emptied itself and left behind a world washed clean. Trees glistened with frost-glass branches, and the cabin roof sagged under white weight, but the wind had gentled, and the silence outside was no longer cruel. Inside, the air smelled of ash, bread, and something new. Sage awoke before the girls and sat near the hearth, her hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold long ago. She hadn't slept much. The events of the day before had pressed against her ribs all night. Judgment, suspicion, the way they all looked at her like she was dirt with a voice. But it wasn't fear that stirred in her now. It was clarity. Koken stepped in from the cold, bringing a gust of white and pine behind him. His breath fogged the air, and his eyes, dark and unreadable as ever, landed on her. He shut the door, stomped off his boots and said nothing. But his glance lingered on her face, like he was checking for cracks. I'm all right, she murmured. I didn't ask, he said, but his voice was too soft to fool anyone. He set a bundle on the table, fresh venison wrapped in waxed cloth. Then he turned and added more wood to the fire. She watched him kneel, watched the strength in his arms, the way he treated fire like it was something sacred, something alive. I thought about leaving again, she said quietly. His shoulders tensed, just slightly. But I didn't pack, she continued. And I don't want to. The fire cracked. He didn't look up, but she felt his silence deepen, an attention beneath stillness. I stayed because I'm not done here, she said. Because the girls reach for me in their sleep. Because this cabin smells like memory, not fear. Because you don't ask for much, but you mean what you give. Now he looked at her. She set her cup down. You never asked me to be anything. And maybe that's what made me become someone. He rose slowly, his breath steady. You don't need to say anything, she added. I will, he said. But not with words. He crossed the room and opened the cedar chest that sat beneath the window. From within, he drew out a folded garment, brown wool, lined with rabbit fur, edges hand-stitched with soft red thread. A woman's cloak. Old, but lovingly kept. This was Taya's, he said. But it doesn't belong to the dead. He held it out to her. She took it carefully, like one might accept a newborn child. Are you sure? It needs someone to live in it again. She folded it across her lap, eyes burning. And if I do? Then you're not a guest anymore. That night, the sky held no stars, only snow drifting like feathers beneath a heavy moon. The girls wore matching blue dresses and carried pine branches in their hands. Sage had braided their hair with ribbon, kissed their cheeks, and let them spin in circles until they tumbled into giggles. She didn't know what this was, not a wedding by law, not anything that townsfolk would honor. But in this part of the world, promises didn't need paper. They needed fire. Witnesses. Intent. And something sacred between two people. Koken lit a circle of torches around the clearing, their flames shivering against the snow. He wore a white fur cloak over his bare chest, a leather band across his brow, feathers at his shoulders. He stood tall, unmoving, like a tree that had survived too many storms. Sage stepped out of the cabin, the old cloak around her shoulders. It smelled of cedar and a woman she'd never know, but she didn't carry it like a ghost. She carried it like inheritance. When she reached the center of the fire ring, the girls took her hands and whispered, "Now you're ours forever." Koken stepped forward. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, and the snow lit on his hair like dust from another world. "You stayed," he said. "I did. And I never meant to love again. I know. But I do." A hush fell over the clearing. He reached into his coat and drew out a ring carved of pale wood, simple, smooth, and warm from his hand. "It's not gold." "I don't want gold," she whispered. "It's not from the town." "I don't want the town." "It's from the ash tree behind this cabin," he said. "It broke in last winter's storm. But the roots lived." Sage's eyes brimmed. He slipped it on her finger, and though it was not forged of silver, it fit as if it had always waited for her. Then she did something bold. She reached up, touched the scar on his brow with her thumb, then kissed him. Slow, reverent, full of every word she'd never spoken. The girls clapped. Somewhere beyond the clearing, an owl called. And the fire burned higher, as if the night itself had blessed them. Back inside, Sage laid the girls to sleep, brushing hair from foreheads that no longer dreamed of loss. When she returned to the hearth, Koken sat waiting, carving something small in his palm. She sat beside him. "What now?" she asked. "Now," he said, placing the carving in her hand, a bear this time with a heart carved into its chest. "You become part of the stories we tell." She smiled, quiet and full. "I'll never be her," she said. "You were never meant to be. I'm not sure I'm brave enough." "You stayed. That's more than most." They sat together in the hush, firelight dancing across their faces, snow whispering against the windows. And in that cabin wrapped in storms and sorrow and soft new beginnings, Sage realized something that would follow her the rest of her days. Love wasn't loud. It didn't come crashing down like thunder. It arrived like snowfall, silent, weightless, slow, until it covered everything. And it stayed. If you've ever felt cast aside, too bruised to belong, too tired to try again, let this be your fire. Let this be your sign. Sometimes home doesn't come in the shape you thought. Sometimes it comes in children's laughter, in a man's silent loyalty, in a ring carved from a broken tree that still lives. If you're wandering, aching, looking for a place to rest, remember, love does not demand. It welcomes. Quietly. Like snow. And it stays. Just long enough to thaw you back into yourself.